So, who you say is the suspect? I asked, unable to believe my ears that it was finally happening. How many times need I say? It's Nellie. Goodness, you should get your ears checked. Old Mrs. Murphy genuinely seemed concerned, for I had already asked her to say the name out loud 4 times. It almost felt like a dream, though I couldn't show it in front of the old woman. I truly wanted to smile and laugh to my heart's content. Too bad that I couldn't show my true emotions and had to fake a concerned expression. Nellie, the girl I have only watched from a distance at Edna's coffee shop for a long time. She used to stare at me with disdain, but look at her now. So pathetic, as I watched her distressed face trying to explain to the other employees that she was innocent. I couldn't help getting filled with joy, so much so that I was barely able to hold the deadpan expression. The first day I saw her, I was but a 12-year-old child. Her vulgar legs were wrapped around my father's waist as she jumped on him. Trust me, I had never been so disgusted in my life. My father, who seemed to be doing a little too well after my mother's death, was becoming an eyesore to be, and that was the day when I found out why he was behaving that way. The coffee shop that my mother used to run with such care and warmth was given as a gift that a few months before my mom's death, I started to notice bruises on her body which she always tried her best to cover. Whenever she looked at me, she would give me a bright smile. Back then, I only felt happy because of that, but now that I'm trying to picture her smiling face, all I can remember is her weary eyes and her weak state. When they were taking away Mom, and everyone was talking about how she jumped out the window to unalive herself, all I could see was the expression on her face that was of sheer terror. I still don't understand how no one else could tell that there had to be another explanation behind it. The way Dad was trying to force his tears out was so visible, but I couldn't understand how others were buying his fake sadness and sympathizing with him. When he gifted the cafe to that wretched woman, I wanted to scream and tell him that I knew that he was the one who did something to my mom, but I knew if I did that, he would get rid of me without hesitation. After thinking about it for so long, I realized that if my dad wanted to do anything on his own, he would have done so long ago. It wasn't like he ever tried to hide his affair from Mom. Was he after her cafe? If so, then why give it to his mistress? That was when it hit me. He wasn't the one who did it. It was probably that wench. Since the realization, I started watching her from afar, watching how she tainted my mom's beloved cafe and treated it like her own. The way she walked around with her nose held high made me want to strangle her that instant. As time passed, I grew anxious and couldn't wait for my revenge. I had to do something for her to confess her crimes, but I didn't know what to do. Then one day, the opportunity presented itself when she walked into my room in Dad's absence. Initially, I was surprised and disgusted when I got out of the shower and saw her looking at me lustfully. But when she told me about her misunderstanding, it gave me an idea. I told her what she was thinking was right, but I was afraid of Dad finding out. That's why I didn't reveal my intention to her. She walked closer and placed her repulsive lips on me by saying he wasn't coming home tonight, so he wouldn't find out. I grabbed drinks from the refrigerator and started drinking with her while pretending to be happy that I finally got her, when in reality I was disgusted by her. Just when she was drunk enough, she started babbling about how Dad was the only one who pushed my mom off the bedroom window. She also told me it was she who egged him to do it. I was so furious that I started choking her, but that was when the door was angry and lunged at me. But before he could do anything, I grabbed a knife and then put it on the drunk Nellie's hand. Then, with the knife in her hand, I stabbed his chest multiple times until he finally died. I retreated to my bedroom, and around 2 in the morning, I called the police and pretended to have just woken up and saw that in the living room. I began crying as I told them how heartbroken I was, that first my mom died and now my father was killed. Of course, pretending to be scared of the killer, who was also part of my plan. The police showed up, but since Nellie was dead drunk, they didn't suspect her. They were clever and observing enough to tell that someone tried to frame her, and it truly frightened me that she might get away. A few months later, when the police couldn't find any other possible suspect, and luckily I was also ruled out from the suspect list, they began focusing on Nellie. I had just received the good news from an old worker of my mom's cafe, and trust me, I was over the moon. All I wish is that she gets arrested smoothly and without any further drawbacks.
Bernadette, honey, some of my friends are coming over. Can you prepare some snacks for us? Upon uttering those words from my lips, I observed my wife's piercing gaze swiftly directed toward me from the vicinity of the kitchen. The intensity of her expression did not catch me off guard. I anticipated such a reaction, since she wasn't happy with my recent behavior changes. Are you going to play games all night with them, again? As she spoke, her voice was infused with a wave of unmistakable anger, warning me to steer clear of the people I had been spending time with. I approached her from behind and enveloped her in a warm embrace to melt her anger, withdrawing from my embrace before shifting her gaze to meet mine. For God's sake, Noah, you'll be 50 in 2 months. Act your age. She looked into my eyes and informed me of my age once again. Who said a 50-year-old can't play games? I pouted with my question. It's not only about games, Noah. You guys scream like 5-year-olds while playing. And what about when you end up cursing each other after making weird bets? Should any of this be the behaviors of someone your age? I couldn't deny. She didn't say anything after that either, since she knew I was trying to avoid her confrontations. She doesn't understand why I do what I do. It's not like I am getting any younger. As I grow old, I am more inclined to prioritize my desires and live life on my terms rather than concern myself with societal expectations and judgments regarding the behavior of an older man. F that. I choose to disregard such irrelevant noise. I don't blame my wife. She is growing old. After approximately 30 minutes, a distinct sound reached my ears, and I recognized it as the doorbell. Without hesitation, I made my way to the entrance of my abode and discovered that Bernadette was already present, welcoming my friends with a smile. One of the characteristics I deeply admire about her is her ability to conceal negative feelings, ensuring that others are unaffected. I led my companions to my room, where we settled in for an evening of gaming. As we played the popular mobile game Free Fire, we lost ourselves in the thrilling action and intense competition. Meanwhile, my thoughtful wife silently brought in the snacks I had requested and placed them on the nearby table before quietly slipping out of the room, presumably to retire for the rest of the evening. As I continued to dominate the game and earn the coveted title of MVP player, I couldn't help but tease my friends, playfully insisting that their age was the reason for their inferior performance. This playful banter ignited their competitive spirit, making it an even more exciting and enjoyable gaming session, as Michael was ready to place a bet. He wanted the player who lost the MVP title 3 times in a row to give $200 to the winner and never play games again. I agreed, since I was overconfident that I would win this challenge. After the bet, we commenced the first match, but to my dismay, I failed to secure the MVP title, as my opponents appeared to be collaborating against me. Nevertheless, I remained optimistic, believing I would emerge victorious in the next round, and brushed my first loss with a chuckle. However, as we progressed through the second game, I became increasingly agitated when I noticed my teammates supported each other while I was left to fend for myself. As the second game came to an end, I lost the title once again. The other two, who had been assisting each other, had each secured one victory. I couldn't help but feel cheated. This made me feel frustrated, and my anger started to build up. I couldn't help but shout at them, "Hey, quit cheating, you two, or I won't play with you anymore." I was so upset that I abruptly exited the game. However, my two friends snickered and muttered, "You won't be playing after tonight anyway." Their words made me even more furious, and my temper skyrocketed. "What did you just say to me, shithead?" I glared at Michael, who seemed to be having the time of my life, before my punch flew to his jaw, leaving them dumbfounded at my reaction. But before he could understand what was going on, several more punches followed the first one, and all I could see was red before my eyes, as I had lost all my senses of reason to anger. As I continued hitting him, I could hear some distant voices asking me to stop, and trying to pull me away from him, before I was brought back to reality by the worried soft voice of my wife. She managed to pull me toward her and cupped my cheeks. She then looked at me with these worry-filled eyes, asking me to calm down. I could still feel the palpitation and heat emitting from my body as I turned to see unconscious Michael covered in blood. My bloody fist screamed that I had another one of those rage attacks, but I thought I stopped having these anger episodes. Bernadette immediately called an ambulance while I sat in a daze, wondering when I would get rid of the IED that had continued to haunt me for as long as I can remember. Looking at Michael's condition, I am sure if I didn't stop when I did, I would have killed him with my bare fists, just like I killed her all those years ago.
The clown I met that day. During my childhood, I went through a phase marked by an intense feeling of irritability. It was around the time when I turned 11, and my parents welcomed my newborn sister into our family. Instead of feeling elated, I pushed away everything that brought me joy before. I was resentful towards my parents when they praised other children over me or brought home a toy that didn't interest me. My parents soon became aware of my hatred towards my sister, Claire, and they decided to take action. When my sister turned 1, they planned a vacation trip to Copenhagen. I can still remember my excitement when I learned of the trip, but I didn't want to show my enthusiasm to my parents. I continued to act grumpy, hoping to conceal my excitement from them. We embarked on an exciting road trip in the spacious van my parents had rented to accommodate our luggage. As we drove on the road, I felt a rush of excitement surge through me as I gazed out of the window, admiring the passing cars, trees, and scenery. Suddenly, my attention was diverted to a county fair we were passing by. The fair was brimming with energy, with thousands of people entering it. I noticed many children around my age laughing and playing, some holding candy canes while others had colorful toys. It was a spectacular sight, bursting with an explosion of colors, sounds, and smells. It ignited my senses and filled me with an insatiable curiosity and desire to experience it all. I turned to my parents with pleading eyes, my heart pounding excitedly, and begged, "Can we please go there?" But my mom, with a regretful expression, dismissed the idea, saying, "Sorry, honey, we can't. If we stop here, we won't be able to make it on time." Frustrated and unwilling to give up, I started insisting and making a fuss. My father scolded me sternly, putting me on the verge of tears when I heard my mom let out a sigh of defeat as she asked, "Promise me that if we take you there, you will behave for the rest of the trip?" I nodded eagerly, and my dad's expression softened, realizing how much the fair meant to me. As we entered the fair, we were greeted with a plethora of vibrant colors, sounds, and smells. The aroma of popcorn, cotton candy, and other snacks filled the air, and the sounds of people laughing and enjoying themselves echoed through the fair. The sight of the Ferris wheel towering above us was awe-inspiring, and the sight of children playing games with their parents and friends was heartwarming. We went through the crowds, and I was overjoyed seeing the various stalls and attractions. Some of the stalls sold toys, while others sold foods and drinks. We played games and won prizes, and I even rode the Ferris wheel. The fairgrounds were teeming with people as we walked through them, the air thick with the smell of cotton candy and popcorn, when our eyes landed on a group of people shouting and laughing while playing dart games. Amidst the chaos, my parents decided to engage in a balut darts duel, challenging each other to see who would come out on top. Amid their excitement, my mother suddenly handed over my 1-year-old sister Claire to me, asking me to keep her safe while they played the game. Carrying my sister in my arms, I felt a sense of responsibility wash over me. I didn't want to be tied down, but I had made a promise to my mother, and I knew I had to keep it. I reluctantly held my sister in my arms, not wanting to be tethered to her, while I looked forward to enjoying the fairgrounds. As I walked around trying to navigate the crowds, my eyes darted around, scanning the area for the dart stall where my parents were playing. But as the minutes ticked by, I realized I was nowhere near where they were playing the game. Panic set in, and my heart raced as I frantically searched for them. My mind started filling with worst-case scenarios, but Claire, on the other hand, seemed oddly calm in my arms, as if she knew that she was safe with me. Her calm demeanor gave me a sense of courage to keep looking. I knew I had to find the dart stall where my parents were playing the game. As I walked through the unfamiliar streets, my heart was heavy with worry about my missing parents. In the distance, I saw a colorful circus with elephants and people dressed in extravagant costumes. Despite my preoccupation, I couldn't resist the urge to look closer. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my shoulder, causing me to spin around in terror. To my surprise, I was face to face with a clown, grinning from ear to ear. He wore a bright, multicolored costume that seemed to glow in the sunlight, and his face was painted with a jovial expression. I couldn't help but let out a scream as my heart raced in my chest from his sudden appearance. The clown tilted his head and spoke in a language I couldn't comprehend. He then crouched down and muttered something else in another language, his expression growing more concerned as he scanned the area. Although I was petrified, I realized he was attempting to ask me something. I nodded, bewildered and unable to grasp a single word he said. The clown tried several other languages, before finally realizing I spoke Swedish. "Where are your parents?" he asked in a slower, more familiar tone. "I don't know," I stammered a reply, my nerves getting the better of me. Upon realizing I was lost, he turned to his fellow performer and waved, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. Then he took my hand and searched for my family with me. His grip was warm, and even though I was terrified, I felt safe beside him as we wove our way through the crowds of people. The clown's presence was impossible to ignore. His colorful outfit and playful mannerisms attracted stares and smiles from those around us, but I barely noticed. All I could think about was finding my family and feeling the relief of their embrace. Finally, through the crowd, I spotted my parents in the distance, searching frantically for me. As we rushed towards each other, my father went to thank the clown, while my mother began yelling and scolding me for wandering off. It was a chaotic scene, but I felt grateful to be reunited with my family, and even more grateful for the kind clown who had helped me find my way back to them. Since that day, a strange transformation occurred within me. The deep-seated animosity that I harbored towards my sister, Claire, slowly faded away, and surprisingly, I found myself genuinely caring for her. I began to appreciate her for who she was, her imperfections and all. As we grew up, the mere sight of clowns sent shivers down the spines of most kids, but for me, Their presence was a sort of comfort and security.
There used to be a time when I used to visit bars quite often within a week, but it has been a long time since then. Now I'm too busy with my work as a lawyer that I hardly get any time for myself, let alone partying in a bar. Currently, I'm occupied with a sensitive case that I'm set to solve by any means necessary. Still, whenever I pass by any alley where there are lots of bars or clubs and see those homeless people selling things, I'm reminded of all those nights when I used to go see her before that incident took place a few months ago. The first time I saw her was the night when I was visiting X nightclub. It was one of the usual spots for our friends to hang out together. Her clothes looked shabby, and her hair was in a mess, but despite all those negative things, even her sylph-like figure could not hide her beauty. Her complexion was amazing. She had the longest eyelashes, prettiest eyes, and the best cheekbone. All the features that I couldn't help but admire, even as a woman. She was selling stone-like jewelry, which quite few to be able to make any profit for the day, but still, I had the sudden urge to buy whatever she was selling, since I couldn't withstand watching her in this condition. Those of you who are thinking why a girl like me was thinking of such things, well, first thing, I guess it was the sympathy, which is a common human nature among us, and second, she somehow reminded me of my dead elder sister. I walked to her and asked the price of them, and surprisingly, she was selling them at a rather cheap price despite such fine handcrafting. No, seriously, if you were to buy such stone handmade jewelry online or in a store, they would cost 10 times more than what she was offering, or maybe more. Looking at how she had just a few of them, I bought all of them, and the slightly happy expression on her face was enough to make my heart feel a bit at peace. The next day I saw her again with a few other ornaments, so I went closer and started asking her about them. As time passed, I somehow became a regular customer, and the two of us started to exchange more than a few friendly words. Her companionship started to feel more assuring and delightful than the friends in that club who were here to seduce men more than to have fun with me. There was a time when I only went to that nightclub so I could commune with her. Over time, I got to know a few things about her life. She was married to a guy to her family's wishes, but wherever she talked about her marriage, I couldn't help but notice her sorrowful tone. And even though she never said this on her own, I figured she wasn't quite happy with her husband. Her barely visible bumps suggested that she was expecting, and that might be the reason she was trying to gather a few bucks by selling homemade trinkets. This made me come to another conclusion. Either she was divorced to her husband, or her life partner didn't earn enough to save for the baby, causing her to go on her own even in this condition. One day when I came out of the bar at the same time when she used to arrive to sell her embellishments, I found her waiting outside with nothing in her hands. Out of worry, I rushed to her and started asking what's wrong, but instead of telling me the cause of her worries, she looked at me with her shiny eyes, and her lips formed into a crestfallen smile. I stood there frozen as she maneuvered a small pendant with a black gemstone around my neck and handed a piece of paper in my hand. For some reason, her actions felt heart-wrenching, and a small droplet of tear made its way down my cheek, which she wiped with her thumb before saying, "If you're free sometime, do pay me a visit." And then she walked away. I felt like I was losing my sister all over again as I watched her back disappear bit by bit. The next day, I didn't see her in that alley, so I impatiently waited for a little more than an hour, hoping for her to arrive. But she didn't. Not that day, and not any other day after that. There was so much that I couldn't get to say to her that I wanted to, and now it felt like I would never be able to. I continued waiting for her outside that alley for a few more days before I remembered the address she gave me written on that piece of paper. Deciding that I would visit her and make sure to bring her home with me just in case she was having a hard time with her husband, I headed toward her supposed residence. But when I got there, what I saw was not a habited house or an apartment. Instead, it was an abandoned building. I hesitantly walked in, only to get hit by a nasty stench. Covering my nose, I started walking toward the source. And once I got there, My heart jumped to my throat as I let out a sorrowful scream. Her guts were shattered around her lifeless body as she was crushed under a huge rock, which didn't seem like it was fallen from there. Instead, it looked as if someone purposefully smashed her head with it. My leg gave up as I wailed like a howling dog in front of her rotting corpse. I couldn't understand. She was perfectly alive the last time I saw her. What went wrong, and who did it to her? My eyes went between her bleeding legs, making my heart feel as if I was going to burst any moment with this terrifying yet despairing scene. I took out my phone and dialed 911 with my trembling hands and wavering thoughts. The cops reached within 20 minutes at the address I provided them and started asking me questions. I told them about everything from the first time I saw her to how I came to find her. After they took charge of the crime scene, they asked me to go home, and they will call me if they were to need my assistance. For the next few days, I couldn't eat, sleep, or focus properly. I stopped going to nightclubs and continued staying at home since I was mentally and emotionally a mess. There was only resentment and unending hatred left in my heart for the bastard who did this to her. I couldn't blame anyone when my real sister died of coronavirus, but this time, when I finally found my sister in her presence, someone purposefully stole her away from me. Who would do so cruel to do that to her and her unborn child? The investigation had started, and the police disclosed her husband's strange disappearance after her death. After a few days, the autopsy results were out, but something didn't add up. According to the results, she died on Friday night, but that was impossible since I met her the next Saturday evening. I touched the stone that she gave me and something hit me, sending a shiver down my spine. Is that why the address she gave me was of that place? Was she already dead and wanted me to discover her body? I immediately took out the pendant and started looking at it carefully, trying to understand if it was a clue to find out who killed her. As I was pinpointing all of my memories with her, I remembered I had seen this necklace more often than I thought. She used to wear it all the time. That meant this might contain the fingerprints of that killer, and luckily, I didn't touch the stone that much, so it was possible that it hadn't faded away just yet. I practically ran to the police club. I submitted it as evidence. They sent it immediately to the forensic lab for testing, and just as I thought it did contain another set of fingerprints that were older than mine. It was her husband, Javier. My hunch was right when I found out he was missing and was the suspect list. He murdered his wife and child. There was no way I was going to let him off easy. I was prepared to go to the end. I filed a separate report against him and hired a bunch of private investigators to find him at any cost. That bastard had taken out a life insurance policy in her name and was thinking of getting that money, so there was no way he was not going to make a move on that. And even if he didn't, even if the search for him was to go in vain, I am set to find that son of a bitch and drag him into the hell where he deserves to be. I have a clue in my hand that suggests that the piece of shit was hiding somewhere in Las Vegas. That filth has no clue what's coming his way. Just wait till I get my hands on him.
Throughout the years, I have delved into the past world of online video games, and undoubtedly, RPG shooter games have always held a special place in my heart. The thrill of engaging with players from all corners of the globe, while simultaneously annihilating virtual enemies, is incomparable. I connected with individuals from all walks of life, forging friendships span countries and continents. I would often stay up into the wee hours of the morning, completely engrossed in the world I was inhabiting, chatting and gaming with my newfound companions. It never once crossed my mind that these online games could threaten my well-being. After all, what could a person halfway across the world, whom I've never met, possibly do to me? That night I was playing Garena Free Fire, an online survival shooter game, that requires players to outlast their opponents to attain victory. And while playing with random players, I teamed up with a highly skilled player who earned the MVP title with the highest kill score despite facing tough competition from other participants. I wouldn't say I was not surprised when he asked me if I would like to play more games with him, for which I pleasantly agreed without any hesitation. He was a skilled player, and I always relished the opportunity to challenge myself by playing with the best and improving my skills. So we continued playing throughout the night until the early morning hours. He entertained me throughout our matches, cracking jokes about our opponents and making me laugh. That he needed to attend to his religious obligations and promptly logged off. It was unexpected, as his language and demeanor during our gaming session had not hinted at him being the religious type. Still, I know better than to make assumptions about people. It slowly turned into my regular interactions with him, where I would spend nighttime playing Free Fire with him, and he would always abruptly go offline when it was time for his morning prayers. While playing with him one night, I mustered the courage to ask him if he genuinely believed in God. To my surprise, he responded, "No, I believe in Satan." I thought he was cracking up another joke, so I started laughing. And he didn't say anything after that either, and we played like we usually did throughout the night. But this time he didn't say he would pray before logging out. I laughed at that, but honestly it did creep me out a little, because the tone he said did not sound like he was trying to make a joke. I then shook off my doubts about his peculiar behavior, thinking he always did make jokes while playing, so possibly this was also one of them. However, this strange pattern continued for several more nights, where he would only go offline after mentioning the ritual, until one night he asked me if I wanted to be part of his rituals and whether I was curious about them. How he spoke sent shivers down my spine, and I tried to remain composed and replied, "Nah man, I'm good. My only ritual is playing online games." And I started laughing, but instead of laughing with me like he always did, he remained silent, leaving me uneasy. This time, about 15 minutes before his usual logging out time, I heard some distant mutterings emanating from his end, which seemed to be more like incantations. The words were hardly discernible, so I could not comprehend what it could be. However, a sudden shiver ran down my spine, which was so palpable that I immediately logged out, claiming I was sleepy before he could ask anything. The thought of everything he had been uttering for the past few days lingered in my mind, and the gravity in his voice hinted that he might be involved in some occult practice. I didn't open my Free Fire account for the next few days, and when I finally logged back in, he was online and immediately sent me a match request. It was as if he was waiting for me. Now, I know I said one should not jump to assumptions, and I was doing the same, but I couldn't help but feel uneasy about the situation, with all the red flags my mind was warning me about. So I blocked his account. I was wishing for it to end there. However, I foolishly continued playing with random players, unaware of what might lurk in the virtual world. During the match, I noticed a player with the username SatD098, who remained quiet the entire time. As the game approached its end, I suddenly heard a voice that struck a chord within me. It felt familiar, yet so unexpected that it sent chills down my spine. How? My mind went blank, and I could not process what was happening. I couldn't think or speak. My entire body was in shock. "Did you block me, Samuel?" he said, uttering my real name, which caught me off guard. His laughter followed his statement, but it wasn't the kind of laughter that put me at ease like it used to, or if he was aware of my identity and whereabouts. I was so scared that I quit the game without completing it. I deleted the app entirely. Could it be possible that he knew my location? What other information did he have access to? Was he stalking me? I felt frightened, worried that he was observing me from a distance. Fortunately, I never heard from him after that, nor did anyone attempt to invade my home or assault me outside my house. Nevertheless, that occurrence etched itself so deeply into my psyche that I harbor trepidation about reopening Free Fire even today.
They said at an early age that something was very wrong with me. I was not showing the usual cognitive behavior like all the other children. They were worried that I would end up like all the other people in the institution, and they were scared for me, people. And it gave them an excuse to treat me harshly, like I cannot feel pain. But it got them nothing. I was 5 when I first strangled a puppy to death. I started killing pets of my neighbor by the time I was 8. And by the time I was 9, I did my very first killing. My very first double murders. It was my parents. I shot them both, 6 times. 3 fathers and 3 mothers. I staged the murder as if they killed each other. The murders were easy. I had to actually shoot myself in the hand to look like a victim. Can you believe a 9-year-old shooting himself in his hand just to prove that he was the victim? It was very painful to shoot myself, but all of this was easier than acting as I cared. I walked free, though they circled me through foster homes. Claudia was 66 with stage 4 cancer of the throat, and she smoked too much. I remember giving her the last cigarette of her life. They always assumed that it was cancer that got her. By the time I was 15, I had already killed numerous animals, a countless number of puppies, and not many people though, except Claudia, my parents, and the old man who used to live down the street from Claudia. I actually enjoyed the company of that old man, but what I enjoyed even more was pushing him down the stairs. I was really hoping to drag him up and then make him fall again. But he hit his head in the first go and started bleeding really bad. It was 5 p.m. and it was a Sunday evening. There was this weird German guy singing really loudly. Now when I think back, I think it was Mozart maybe. But he kept insisting me call the doctor. He wanted me to call a doctor while he was bleeding. I chuckled and said, "Why would I call a doctor? I'm trying to kill you, you silly goose." He looked at me in horror. He was so scared. He looked at the picture of his 5-year-old grandson, and I could see a tear in his left eye. I looked at the picture, and I could myself in it. I was 5 when I started strangled. I felt like I was missing something. As the old man was about to die, I held his hand and said, "I was 5 when I killed a puppy. It's been 10 years. Your grandson seems innocent. Seems like you are a man of God. If you meet him, tell him that I'm going to murder your grandson. I'm going to take his eyes out of his little skull. Tell that to God." There was this insane horror the old man felt. I scared him. And in the face of death, I was the one that scared the old man. So my to-do list was done. As the old man died, I decided to call in for help and then rung up his family and told him about this untimely, unfortunate death. I was hoping they would come to his wake and I would finally kill his little innocent grandson. But turns out, they were too busy to make the trip. So they asked me if I can do them this great favor and bring the casket to them in New York. They would pay me for the trip and do all the necessary processes in order. I said yes. I was a bit furious. I would have loved to kill the boy in the place I was familiar with, but that's okay. I can make things work. They sent me the tickets. Now I knew that I cannot possibly take any of the tools on the plane, so I would have to buy them in New York itself. I was excited about murdering his grandson and was counting down the days to it. I boarded the Atlanta Airlines, the 6-hour journey. I went in on the flight and there were at least 20 people on it, and mostly these elders, the old people. I looked at them and all I wanted to do was stomp their head in. But I couldn't do it in this plane. I had this insane rush and an instant urge to kill them all, to kill every single person on that plane. Burning me on the inside, and I had to act upon it. Now, I had no initial plan on how to do it, but I had to. I just can't control these urges of extreme violence. But then there's the mission that I set myself upon. But the urge was too strong, and the only thing that seemed plausible to me was if everyone died on the plane. And the only way to do that was to hijack the plane. But it would mean going down with them. But I had this obsession with his grandson, and I really wanted to kill him more than anything in the world. I had to kill someone. So I decided to do this hefty trick that I did not know would work. I went to the aisle of the flight attendant and told her that I was facing problems at my seat, and I want to change it to somewhere in the back. That is when she made me sit with a nice old lady who was dozing off as the flight was busy reaching its destination. After thinking for quite a lot of minutes, I pressed her nose with the tip of my fingers to cut her air, and she gasped for it. I took the neck pillow and pressed her face with it. Now I quietly got up from my seat and moved behind to the other, and as I did that, I kept strangling until she stopped moving. She seemed pretty dead. I wasn't sure though. I rummaged through her handbag she was holding and found that she had quite a bit of morphine in her bag. Along came an idea. I decided to sneak the morphine into all the drinks that were being served. So I took my chances and did that. After doing that, I quickly saw these old people fainting away, and all now I needed to do was slowly suffocate them. The flight attendants or the crew had no idea as to what was going on. One by one, every single one of the passengers was drifting into a state of slumber, but there were some who hadn't drank the water, so some were still quite awake, and killing with few of them still awake was still risky. I moved on and suffocated 3. Only 3 that I could do without getting noticed, because the flight attendant was noticing that there was something odd with the passenger at the seat in front. They were not waking up when the attendant told them to fasten their seatbelt as the plane was about to land, and there was a state of panic throughout the passengers when one of the passengers informed that the passenger beside him is also not waking up. And then I stood up and did the same for the passenger that I had killed, and to be 15 was a blessing. They took me to the side and upgraded me to another class, thinking that this could be dramatic for me. So as the plane landed, I had no idea that how much damage had I done. Foul play was suggested, and the Homeland Security launched an investigation. Everyone in that class was questioned, except me. I was upgraded to another class, and well, that was it. I reached the house of the old man and met with everyone. They treated me with so much warmth and love. Then I met his grandson, and there was it the moment. But surprisingly, the urge to kill him was not there. I was very much moved by the family and the love they were giving me, knowing that I had no one to look out for. They invited me to stay with them for a while, and well, I stayed. Turns out that 12 people died due to an overdose of morphine, and 20 people drank that overdose of water. a sense of fulfillment came to me. And then at that moment, I decided not to kill anyone anymore. I started repressing the urge to kill the old man's grandson. Instead, took care of him like a big brother.
Do you believe in precognition? No, I also didn't, until an accident that happened to me in my junior year of high school. There was a girl in our class who had recently transferred. Her name was Amelia Hush. She was kind of weird, always sitting alone, wearing dark clothes, keeps sketching weird kinds of stuff in her sketchbook. No one knew anything about her, where she lives, or where she came from. She just suddenly transferred out of the blue. We used to make fun of her among ourselves, and not just everyone in our class made fun of her. One day, she stopped a girl in the cafeteria and asked her to not eat beans today. The girl smacked Amelia's hand away, saying, "Mind your own business, weirdo." The girl then went to her friends and started making fun of Amelia while eating beans. They said something about her and started laughing. The girl laughed so hard that beans got stuck in her throat and she started choking, and after a while she was fine. No one else noticed, but the incident felt a bit weird to me. Amelia, who never talks to anyone, suddenly approaching the girl and asking her not to eat beans, which later became the cause of her choking. I couldn't understand, but I shook it off. After that, I started noticing Amelia's every action. Another similar incident happened after that. During volleyball practice, Amelia approached a guy asking for help when he was about to go and play his turn. Even though he kept denying it, she still insisted. The boy shrugged her off and went to play. This incident made me sure that something is up with Amelia. But soon after, another incident took place, when we saw Amelia suddenly pulled a little girl away from her mother. The woman followed her and started to scold her, but at the same time, a truck came and crashed at the same spot. The truck driver died at the scene. It was later found that the brakes stopped working, and in the moment of panic, the driver must have lost the balance and crashed. After that day, a rumor started to spread throughout the school that whoever refuses Amelia, she tries to harm that person, and people started avoiding her even more than before, except for me. I approached her to ask about those incidents. I went near her seat during the lunchtime when everyone was out and asked her, "Hey Amelia, what is up with those accidents? Did you know about it in advance or something?" I was laughing while asking so that it doesn't sound weird, but I was shocked when she nodded her head in agreement. She told me that she could do precognition. She watches the incidents in her dream, and it always comes true. After saying that, she opened her sketchbook. There were roughly made sketches. The first one was a car hitting a dog. The second one had a man who seemed unconscious, and there was also a broken flower pot near his head. I turned the page and saw that girl from the cafeteria choking, and there was a plate of beans in front of her. I was shocked and a bit worried that what if there was a sketch about me as well? So I turned the page to see the next sketch, and there was a boy with a broken nose. It was the last one. So I half believed her. Half of my mind was telling me that she must have drawn these after the incidents occurred. Students started returning to the classroom, so I went back to my seat. I couldn't stop myself from thinking about what I just saw in Amelia's sketchbook. I was questioning myself if I should believe it or not. After school, when I got home, I opened my PC and started looking online for the term precognition. Some people believed in them, but mostly it was written that there is no scientific evidence that precognition is real. It was believed to be a pseudoscience. But then I came across an article in which a neurologist said that she believed precognition to be true. I was still confused. I couldn't find any real evidence behind it, so I shut down the PC. After a few days, it was announced that our class was to go on a field trip. A day before the field trip, Amelia came to talk to me herself for the first time. Something inside me ticked that it is not a good sign. She did not say anything, just showed me a picture of the bus being in an accident, and then she turned the page and showed me a sketch of me. I was unconscious, and my head was bleeding. She had only colored the blood part of the sketch. It freaked me out. She then told me she asked the teacher to cancel the trip or postpone it, but they did not take her seriously. I could not sleep that night thinking about it. I was struggling if I should go or not, and then finally decided to not risk my life. I did not go to the field trip and asked my friends to do the same, but no one listened to me, and they all left. Later that day, we got the news that the bus got into an accident. They were immediately taken to the hospital, but none of them sustained serious injuries. I guess I would have been the only one if I went with them. I bought a gift for Amelia and thanked her for saving my life. 2 weeks later, Amelia transferred from school to somewhere else, and none of us have heard from her ever since. She left as she came, out of the blue, but I started believing in precognition ever since then. Back when I was in college, I used to work evening shifts at an independent coffee shop that happened to be right next door to this little bagel place. I think there must have been some degree of collusion between the two owners, as the bagel place was geared to be like a health nut place, whereas all the baked goods the coffee shop produced had like diabetes-inducing levels of sugar in them. So naturally, I'd often gone to the bagel place to grab a bite to eat before clocking in for my shift. Since the sugar craft that followed, that's how I met Tom. Tom worked full-time at the bagel place, and he was there to take my order like 9 out of 10 times that I stopped by. It wasn't long before he knew my order off by heart. Shortly after that, we were on first-name terms, and the more familiar we got, the more little gentle flirting entered into our daily exchange, and it certainly didn't sting that he started giving me discounts. After a month or so, he asked me if I have a boyfriend. I said no. So he asked me if I'd like to grab a drink or something after our I said sure, because why not, right? But oh my god, if I'd have known that kind of guy Tom was and have just resigned myself to getting fat from the Danishes at work, a few extra pounds would be easy to shake. But a full-blown stalker, not. I was too busy with an upcoming deadline. However, we did arrange to meet over the weekend, so we could see if we click. It definitely wasn't the greatest date I'd ever been on. Like, I don't think whatever chemistry we had really translated into a social conversational setting. But I didn't write them off altogether, and we agreed to go out next time we were both free. It's so weird to think he actually gave me space at first, like we went 48 hours at a time without talking sometimes. It really did seem chill. But then came the day when I walked into the bagel place and the manager was working the evening shift. This is highly out of the ordinary, so I asked her if Tom was sick or something. It's then she hits me with Tom isn't employed here anymore. We decided it was best that we parted ways. I'm shocked. So while I'm waiting for my order, I text Tom to ask him what the heck happened with his parting ways business. He replies pretty quickly, telling me that the manager had caught him giving me a discount and fired him as a result. Immediately, I felt terribly guilty, and I get the idea that if I pay off the difference from what was owed, I could maybe talk her into giving him his old job back. So, and the whole time the manager has this wow expression on her face. Oh, is that what he told you? According to her, Tom hadn't been fired for giving discounts. It was her own policy that employees of local businesses get money off their food. He'd been fired because she'd received a number of complaints from female customers regarding his behavior towards them. His no was the flirt a little offered discounts, then eventually asked for the number. Those who handed it over didn't have a problem. Those that refused got cussed out before he refused service altogether. She claimed she actually had security footage of him going off when a customer, and some of the language he used was absolutely abhorrent. She planned on giving him a final warning over the incident that she prefers to work with and mentor junior staff instead of just kicking them to the curb. But the one thing she can't deal with is liars. He tries to lie his way out of the predicament by claiming the disagreement was because the lady had tried to give him a fake $10 bill. That's like a pathological level of dishonesty, right? They're still insisting on the lies when confronted with overwhelming evidence to the contrary. I just remember apologizing for the intrusion and thanked her for setting me straight before I headed over to work to clock in. I wasn't even sure if I was ever going to talk to him again. I mean, that could have been me getting cussed out if I had the gall to turn them down. When I finished my shift, I got my phone out of my purse and I find that I had a grand total of 12 butt notifications, all with Tom's name attached. They started off all gentle at first. Have a good shift. Text me when you finish, etc. But around 8 p.m., there was obviously a point where he learned of the interaction between me and his former manager, and he was not happy about that. Not one bit. This is exactly what's wrong with the American labor market. Even the workers are bootlickers was the general tone of his messages. I'm not even saying I entirely disagree, but the whole thing left such a bad taste in my mouth, but I wasn't interested in seeing him at all. When I got home from work, I blocked Tom's number, deleted my contact details, and figured that would be that. But oh, how wrong I was. A few days later, I'm working the evening shift, crouched down stocking the mini fridge. I finish up, close the fridge. Then when I stand and turn around, Tom stood at the register. I tried to be as warm and friendly as possible, asking how he's been and stuff. First, I think I dodged a bullet, as he's perfectly civil and goes on to order a drink. But like right as I'm handing him his drink, he decides to make it super awkward. So I guess you're pretty much done with me, He didn't say it in that particularly aggressive way, but it was loud and jarring enough to attract the attention of almost everyone in the store. I feel like I'm about to hear a voice as possible. This isn't the time or place. Please drop it. He just smiles, nods, and starts walking away. But instead of actually walking out of the door like I thought it was going to, he just takes a seat right in the middle of the store and proceeds to just stare at the register area in between baby sips of his coffee. And that's basically how it started. Tom would show up for coffee register. He was never rude or awkward about it, not after the initial incident anyway. So despite the fact that my boss had assured me that any funny business would result in a lifetime ban, he was reluctant to kick him out for being a little weird, as he phrased it. That got to be a kind of running joke about it to everyone calling him Vicky Stalker, and I have to admit that one about upselling the Portuguese custard tarts until he was too fat to chase me. That one really didn't make me smile, but boy did that stop being funny. After the first time, he followed me home. After that, things got serious. I called the cops, got some advice from their fixated persons unit, and they actually paid Tom a visit to warn him off stalking me. But apparently he was only deterred for about a week, and what followed was a painfully slow escalation of intensity that culminated in the following. And that the 24 times had followed me up till that point, Tom had either stayed on the street corner and watched me walk into my building, or stood outside the building and looked up at the windows like he was trying to work out exactly which unit I was in, right behind me by the time I got to my door. Seeing him so close actually elicited the kind of squeal from me I'm definitely not proud of. But Jesus Christ, seeing him right there just about scared the poop out of me. I absolutely bowled it inside. Never been so grateful that the lock was operated by a key fob instead of an actual key. Tom just stayed at the door, banging on it and telling me to get my butt out there, that I had to be an adult and talk to him about it. Whatever it was, since he was banging on the door and screaming in the street, I was totally freaking out. I was the one inside because the building I live in at the time looked exactly like all the other family homes on the block. To him, I could have quite easily been the only person the floor was occupied entirely by this Puerto Rican guy who worked night shifts. Keep in mind that this whole thing is going on in a Saturday afternoon. smack bang in the middle of this guy's sleeping time. So while I'm praying for the cops to show up in time, an unlikely savior is about to come to my rescue. So imagine you're me. Oh, you can hear us, Biggie. If you think that you can just punk guys like me and I'll face the consequences, you're dumber than you look. Bang, bang, bang. Hey, are you crazy? I'm trying to sleep here. My neighbor from downstairs. His name actually turned out to be Luis, is wearing nothing but a pair of shorts, and he's screaming in Tom's face as he backs down the steps of our building. Tom starts saying something back to him, but Luis keeps shouting over him, telling him to get lost. Get it doesn't like he's, oh, you're gonna tase me, bro, before the confrontation gets physical. Everyone else in the streets is fixated on the fistfight that's now going down, but all I can focus on is what Luis said, tase me. Tom and brought a taser, presumably to use on me. Now by that point, because the cops were getting called about the fight on top of my stalking complaint, a marked patrol car rolls onto the scene. With a by now bloody Tom trying to walk away from the scene, the cops initially go for Luis, drawing their guns and demanding a show of hands. The cops and I watch as Tom starts to walk faster away from the scene, which obviously prompts the cops to chase him down and arrest him for carrying a concealed weapon or whatever they had in mind. Finally, my stalker was in police custody, only wouldn't catch charges for the actual stalking. He ended up going to jail for the one thing cops could stick to him, the contents of his backpack. On the one day that Tom had decided to act on this little fixation and move in to take me, or whatever, he had come with a pre-prepared kidnap kit, along with a few other choice items. According to the detective I spoke to after the fact, Tom had chosen to confront me that day while carrying duct tape, a length of electrical cord, a kind of retractable baton, and a box of 100 different contraceptives. For some reason, is that last part that particularly creeped me out, not so much their inclusion, but the sheer freaking number of them. At his trial for conspiracy to commit kidnapping, Tom's attorney argued the state was trying to wrongfully prosecute more about malicious than home supplies. The prosecution had a different story. Not only had they obtained CCTV image of Tom showing up at the course of 2 months, but a search of his home had turned up some extremely disturbing discoveries. What Tom had in his backpack that day was just a fraction of the kidnap kits, but by far the most disturbing was the surgical tools and the Civaflorin canister face mask combo. Yeah, I had brainwashing and beating. He also had a bunch of foreign language comic books that seemed to focus heavily on carnal torture, I suppose you could say. The prosecution just piled on all this evidence until it was quite was an extremely dangerous individual. I was terrified to escape justice via some loophole or something. Maybe he'd have rich parents who could pay for some smart lawyer. Proceed to commit kidnapping. As you can imagine, it was quite an ordeal, and I had to make a number of court appearances to confirm that I was one of the subjects of his many fixations. It was the most stressful experience of one day when I feel a hand on my shoulder. My goodness, turn around and see the face of a man who wants to finish what he started. Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
Circus clowns. And sometimes it's down to those Stephen King's It adaptations. Shout out to Tim Curry's miniseries. And forget about it. Traumatized for life. I didn't see the miniseries until just before the movies came out a few years back, so I can't blame my fear. But I'm pretty sure I was chill with clowns until my cousin's 7th birthday party, when something happened that gave me a legit phobia that's lasted into my 30s. So, I'm like 5 years old, it's my cousin's 7th birthday party, and for some reason, he's obsessed with old-fashioned big-top circuses. I think it was maybe from watching Dumbo so much, but the point is He's all about clowns, training lions, elephants, all that stuff. This gives his mom an idea to throw a circus-themed birthday party, which would include a visit from an actual real-life circus clown. From what I can remember, that party was awesome until the clown showed up. There was a bouncy house, snacks, party games, all that good stuff. And then after a while, the clown shows up. So he's about foaming at the mouth with how happy he is. Clown guy does balloon animals, all the clown cliches, and then for whatever reason, he starts looking for 2 volunteers. He obviously picks the birthday boy on the guidance of his mom, so he just happens to pick me too. And that's when he starts tickling me. I hate being tickled. Always have, probably always will. Not like most people who find it slightly unpleasant or, God forbid, those weird tickle fetishists who actually enjoy it. Nah, I legit hate being tickled, even back when I was 5. So the fact this clown dude is tickling me is already putting me on edge, and I don't want to ruin the fun, so I remember just kind of playfully pushing him away. But he wouldn't take the hint. He keeps tickling me and singing this dumb song like tickle, 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 tickle. And then right as I lose my temper, I turn to be like, get off me, clown dude. I just see blooper creepy high-pitched way actually tickling me, and there's blood running down his face. I scream like a little girl. I bolted towards the house, screaming and crying, running full pelt at the glass patio doors, which just so happened to be shut. And boom, I'm out like a light. I woke up in the car on the way to the hospital. It felt like I was out for hours, but from what my dad told me it was more like a couple of minutes. Because I was 0 to 100 into those patio doors, I didn't remember getting knocked out, severely broken nose, and there was blood all over me, and my last clear memory of it being tickled by a bloody clown, or, as I remembered it, a monster trying to eat me. So as I woke up, I was inconsolable, and I don't think I calmed down until a nurse got some painkillers in me. Jay was angry that I'd ruined his birthday party, but that's just something we laugh about now. I guess I see the funny side myself these days, but that doesn't change what the event did to my psyche. It ingrained in me a deep-seated fear of clowns that caused some awkward moments in the years that followed. I'm not proud of it, but not 6 months after it happened, I actually peed my pants in a shopping mall when I saw a guy dressed up as Ronald McDonald. Like, I'm serious. It messed me up for a long time, and even today, I'm proud to say I managed to sit through the It movie. The first one, anyway. After working up to it with the old Tim Curry series. That's why I'm scared of clowns.
The story happened a month ago. There was hands down the scariest moment of my life. Everything turned out fine that, but I really did not think that at the time it goes something like this. My friend and I were very interested in witchcraft. We live in the Bible Belt, and there has always been a strong stigma against paganism or spiritual beliefs other than Christianity. Like any sane human beings, we naturally rebelled and became fascinated with witchcraft, the occult, and other stuff like that. That's not to say that we're satanic and generally trying to discover a new religion or something. I mean, I still go to church every Sunday. Anyway, a couple of years ago, I had introduced my friend to witchcraft. She didn't know anything about it before, but wow, she really went off the deep end. I was only moderately interested, but she took it to a new extreme. She even runs some kind of witch group on Facebook. I heard it's pretty popular. She knows witches and warlocks from all over the world and regularly participates in paganistic festivals. This one weekend, my parents had planned a trip to go to the beach. It was their anniversary, like they almost always picked the beach for some reason. It was never the same beach, but a beach nonetheless. Anyways, this was our opportunity to hang out all weekend without any indie stuff. That wasn't the only thing we had planned though. Late that Friday, our nails and makeup. We didn't really have anywhere to go. So we just walked down to the convenience store that's down the road from my house. There's a small diner inside of it. They only offer a couple of things to eat. So we went there, got some waffles at like 3, and natural waiting around for a while. Decided to go back to my place. By the time we were getting settled in for the night, I could feel both of our moods changing. We were both getting really excited to do the ritual. We talked about it a little bit here and there. She told me that she had something grand planned for that night. She didn't tell me what exactly that was going to be, though. Well, you got settled in for the night, and by the time we did, the sun was already setting. We were going to do this ritual. I asked my friend if she wanted to do it, and she said yes. She went to her backpack that she brought to get something out. I wasn't sure what it was going to be. I honestly wasn't sure what physical objects you needed to do any kind of ritual. I mean, can't you just channel your different? The hair on my arms were standing up, and she pulled out a Ouija board. I don't know if you believe in any of this stuff, but I can tell you that I was only a half believer until I felt my body physically change. The second I was in the presence of that board, this has certain power to it. The ability to communicate with spirits or ghosts may be something else entirely. Who knows? My friend brought the Ouija board to the kitchen table, and we both sat down. My mind was racing with questions. All we can say for sure is that I wanted to talk to a ghost. I already knew who I wanted to speak with before we even started channeling anyone. My grandmother. She had horrible cancer toward the end of her life, and that was how she died. She passed away in this house. It was a few years back. I was young. I always had this feeling that I didn't spend enough time with her, and I always had a lingering feeling that her spirit was still with us. And tonight was going to be the night that I got to speak with her once and for all. We sat down and began the ritual. Unfortunately, we didn't have any candles, so we just had to turn out all the lights except for the stove light. There was also some light coming in from a street light outside, and it looked really good and spooky. I told her that we were going to be talking to my grandma first, that she was still in the house with us. She agreed, and we started calling out her name. So here was the first weird part. I only addressed the spirit as what my grandmother's actual name was. As much as I kind of wanted to believe that I was going to be able to speak with her, I felt like it would have been disrespectful to use her full name when doing the ritual. So I only refer to her as Grandma. Eventually, we got a reply. We asked if anyone was with us. The first time we asked, it went to now. Then again the second time. But the third time, the pointer went to yeah. Who was with us? It spelled out my grandmother's name. Again, my friend did not know my grandmother's name. I just found it weird. After the name had been seen, really excited. That wasn't the feeling that I got to. I got really freaked out. It made me nervous. And that was the moment that I had realized that there was more to this world than what we see way more. I totally get it if it doesn't prove anything for you, especially because you can't verify what I'm saying. But for me, it was more than enough. Unfortunately, that was the trying again. The next day, though, my friend and I followed a similar routine on Saturday, and by the time it was getting dark, we had that vision board out. My parents had to be home on Sunday, so we knew that this was going to be our last night of doing this. So it happened like this. We sat down to try and contact another spirit. This time, we didn't try to contact my grandma. We just tried in a spirit in the vicinity you were in the house. I remember sitting down with my friend and saying, if anyone was with us, please, will you give us a sign? And at that exact moment, we heard a loud banging on the garage door. We both started screaming because we thought some kind of horrible spirits had been unleashed. We freaked out for a little while, but get this, it was my dad. He knew that I was letting my friends sleep over at our house and wanted to pull a joke on us, and they had been funny for him. And he still laughs about it sometimes for me in the moment, to think that I had unknowingly unleashed some kind of demonic beast into the world. That was truly the worst part.
wasn't really anything we can do to undo it. There's no Control plus Z with a ghost.
I was one of those kids you see walking around zoos or amusement parks wearing a leash. Those were already a thing 20 plus years ago, but less common, and were initially only tied around the wrist. In my case, it was a necessity. I would always start wandering off from the rest of the family no matter what situation. This is one of the stories that led to me earning my leash. It happened when I was about 6 years old and I went to the zoo with my mom and sisters. Before every family outing, my mom made sure to give me the talk about not walking off again or face the consequences. My mom was a strict parent that made good on her promises. She had to, being a single mother of 3. I didn't try to disobey her per se, but I often just didn't pay attention to the world and people around me. Arden caught my attention, and off I was. When I finally realized I separated myself from my mom and sisters again, I panicked. My family would eventually find me. So I did. I got lost within a couple of minutes, walking around a strange neighborhood looking for either our car or the way back to the zoo. Nothing looked familiar. Just normal looking, about 40 years old, asking me if I'm lost. I explained I lost my family when we were visiting the zoo and I'm looking for the way back. I couldn't believe my luck when the man told me he had just come from the zoo and saw a family there standing near the entrance who were waiting for a little girl with blonde hair and a baseball cap. But it was still a few blocks away, so he proposed I walk with him to his car and we could drive the rest of the way back. Just the mention of his car finally made me hesitant. I told him I wasn't allowed to get in the car with him. He then said something like, "That was true, but I look smart enough to know I could trust someone." When they were looking for me, so he's not a complete stranger. That didn't seem right. I asked him if he was in. I was just really confused about everything and scared of how angry my mom was going to be after all this. Finally, my crying caught the attention of the security guard of a parking building we were standing next to, asking if there was something he could help with. The guy stepped aside with the security guard and started explaining the situation, but made it vaguely sound like he was my father and we were looking for his wife. The security guard seemed to believe him, pointing us in the direction right towards the zoo. The man thanks the security in a comforting, friendly, adult-to-child kind of way, why I'm still crying. I tell him that my dad is dead. He looks really confused for a second, then asks if this man is not my dad. I tell him again, no, my dad is dead. In a split second, his whole face and posture changes, and he turns to look at the guy, who's trying to explain he never actually said he was my dad, that the security guard must have misunderstood, and he was just helping me find my mom. The security guard said he appreciated the man's help, but he would take me off his hands now, and the guy immediately took off. I don't think there was much else the security guard could have done. I explained the whole situation, and after making a phone call, he walked me to the entrance of the zoo, which was just around the corner from the parking building. From there, we were brought to the security's office where my mom and sisters were already waiting. I feel extremely lucky for the security guard being at the right place at the right time that day, and very grateful for the extra second of time he took that could have made all the difference.